Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Zo, Om Mani 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 Om Mani 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 Zo, Gevadi Nyoda Dadamba Sanje Jogene Java Jegamba Deye Zalagava.
Amjol Bessemur. So today, at this very sacred place, renowned all over the world, we are gathered here in Buddhist tradition. The Buddha did the 6-year austerity practice and realized selflessness, and then overcame all the defilements from his mind stream and became fully enlightened. And so this is the place where he became enlightened, a very sacred place. So the weather is cold, but just think that you have blessing. So today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, these 3 days, the main disciples for these teaching are the Indians as school children, and also Indians interested in Buddhism from different parts of India. So they are the main disciples for this audience, for this teaching. Where are the other Indians sitting? So these 3 days, the teaching for these 3 days, the main disciples are the Indians. And first, in the beginning, we'll have the recitation of Pali and Sanskrit shlokas.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
एकस्मिन् समये भगवान् राजगृहे विहरति स्म घृतकुटे पर्वते महताभिषु सङ्घेन सार्धं महता च बोधिसत्त्वेन तेन खलु समयेन.
So, as I said before, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, assumes the enlightenment, deed of enlightenment, becoming enlightened, and said that I have found this nectar-like Dharma, which is profound, peaceful, uncontaminated, compounded and clear light, and so forth. If I were to teach to others, no one will understand me. Therefore, I will stay silent in here. And so, This is true because at that time in India, the philosophical traditions which were asserting an independent self, and therefore within the context of believing in life after death, rebirth, I mean they came up with this idea that the agent that goes from one life to the next is something which is permanent, whereas the Buddha and the enlightened beings saw that this clinging to the self, an independent self, is the root of all other afflictions, mental afflictions. And because in this country, in the land, the other philosophical traditions were believing in an Atman, an independent soul, and therefore, even after realizing the selflessness of such an Atman, the inexistence of such an Atman, the Buddha said that if he taught the selflessness, it won't befit the disciples at the time. And then gradually, as time went by, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths in Varanasi. And with regards to the main import of this verse that I recited, the peaceful, profound, and so forth, that was taught during the second turning of the wheel of Dharma in Vulture Peak, where in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings, the Buddha taught that things have no essence, whatever, no independent essence and intrinsic existence. Of course, during the first teaching of the Dharma in the Four Noble Truths teaching, the Buddha did teach true cessation, which shows that it is possible to overcome the mental afflictions and attain that of liberation, and particularly that it is possible for an individual, each and every individual, to reach that goal. And for that, the teaching on emptiness is taught in great detail. And then, in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, one aspect of this turning of the wheel of Dharma is the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra unfolding unraveling the thought of the Buddha, but this is taught according to those disciples who have the dispositions to the Chittamatra philosophical view, and therefore in this sutra, the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra, the Buddha said that the dependent nature, the imputed nature, and the perfect nature. So the imputed nature is merely imputed by our conception, whereas the dependent nature has its own nature, intrinsic existence, on the basis of which we establish that of the perfect nature, which is the absence of that of the imputed nature on the dependent nature. And so the main the teaching of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma comes in the third turning aspect, which is the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, which becomes the source text for Mahayana Uttara Tantra, which teaches, so this Mahayana Uttara Tantra and the Tathagata Garbha Sutra teaches that of the subjective clear light of mind, whereas in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught that of the object clear light, that is, which is emptiness. And so after the Buddha passed away, then Master Nagarjuna and others distinguished between the contents of the sutras, teaching the varieties and the profound meaning. So they distinguish precisely. And so the Kashyapa and so forth, the 7 successors to the Buddha, have, of course, preserved the teaching of the Buddha that comes in the Pali tradition, which has the practice of Vinaya and Abhidhamma and so forth. Whereas when the intellect of the disciples grew and people began to logically check the teaching of the Buddha and using reasoning such as by Master Nagarjuna and so forth, then the Nalanda tradition also came up, where the reasoning is used very extensively. And so we do study the texts written by the Nalanda masters. And so up to now, 2,600, nearly 2,600 years since the Buddha appeared in the world. I mean, during this period of time, there have been lots of ups and downs in the teaching of the Buddha in India. But even today, we have the teaching of the Buddha. So not only resorting to scriptural authority, but using reason and logic. People with critical analysis. They take special interest these days. So first we'll have the hot tea. So the qualities of the Buddha is inconceivable, the qualities of the Dharma inconceivable, the Sangha are inconceivable. I make this offering to the... So if you reflect, the Buddha himself, according to the mental dispositions of the disciples, or beings, because there are differences in the mental dispositions of the different beings, accordingly, according to their nature, character, inclination, interest, and so forth, the Buddha gave different teachings. For example, he said the 5 aggregates are the burden, and the person or the being is the carrier of this load. So the person is the carrier and the aggregates the load. And this shows as if there is a person or a self, a being, separate from the 5 aggregates, as if they are separate from the 5 aggregates. And in other teachings of the Buddha, he says there is no person or being, but karma is there. There is karma. Whereas still in other teachings, the form and so forth do not have external existence, but these objects that appear external are arise merely due to the arisal of the imprints for them, and they are not substantially different from the subjective perception which sees them. Whereas in other teachings, whether it's the object or the subjective mind, nothing has any independent existence, Nothing has any essential existence. For example, in the Heart Sutra, we find mentioned that all the form and so forth are devoid of any essential intrinsic existence. And so in the Perfect and Wisdom teachings, it is said that everything are merely nominal and merely name. And also the 6 perfections and the 37 factors of enlightenment are merely nominal. And the resultant stage of the Buddhahood, the 10 powers and the 4 fearlessnesses are merely nominal. And so there you can see how there are different teachings within the Buddha's teaching itself. And therefore, the Buddha clarified himself by saying, monks and scholars, just as the gold is tested by burning, cutting, and polishing, likewise, you should examine my teaching and accept it, but not out of your devotion. So what he says is that you should not accept my teaching for just because it is said by me, but you should check what kind of reason and logic can support the teachings, and those teachings which can be verified through reasoning and logic, and you should accept them, and not only stay there, but you should experiment those teachings, and then when you find that they actually give rise to experience within you accordingly, then you should adopt the teaching. And so, of the many different founding teachers of the different religious traditions, it is only the Buddha who has said such a thing about his own teaching. And so within the teaching, there is the Pali tradition, which has the Vinaya tradition, as well as the practice of Shamatha and Vipassana, and others, but there is not. It seems they do not have much critical analysis, tradition of critically analyzing the teaching of the Buddha. But this critical analysis comes from the tradition that has come down to us, which comes from Master Nagarjuna and so forth. So today, modern science also do not accept some scriptural authority, but they use experiments, they check and examine and research the things, and not only that somebody has found something to be so and so, but when that is verified by others as well, and then there is when others also come to the same conclusion, they do accept that as to be true, in fact. And so not only one or two person can say this is it, but many people do the same kind of analysis and experiment, and then they come to some kind of a consensus. And so in the world today, the education has progressed and developed so much, and particularly science and people's doing analysis and critical investigation into the nature of things also has spread widely. And therefore, the Nalanda tradition, which uses reasoning, seems to be very befitting in this. So Einstein, one great scientist, also has said that the religion which can go in parallel with that of some modern science is Buddhism. So I also have many scientists whom I know, with whom I have discussions. So scientists are taking interest in the teaching of the Buddha. So this teaching of the Buddha, which was taught nearly 2,600 years ago, today we find new people taking interest in it. So the teaching of the Buddha, which can be critically analyzed and come to conclusion, and not merely through scriptural citation. So this is unique. So such a teaching of the Buddha in the world, popularly it is known that the Buddha came, the Buddhism originated in India, and also Master Nagarjuna and his disciples and so forth, and all are known as Indian masters, Indian scholars, Panditas. So with regard to the origin of the teaching of the Buddha, it is India, not Tibet, not China. So therefore, giving this discourse to the Indian Dharma friends, I consider it as I'm very fortunate to be able to have this opportunity, because the teaching of the Buddha originated in India, and the great masters of the great masters of India also were from Nalanda, were from India. And so, most of the teachings or the treatises which use reasoning and logic extensively come from the Nalanda tradition. So, of course, in Thailand and so forth, the Theravada countries have a very good practice of Vinaya and other teachings of the Buddha. But with regard to the Sanskrit tradition, the preservers of this tradition, of course, it has spread to many countries. So the custodians, those who have preserved the teaching of the Sanskrit tradition, in which we have tens of thousands of scriptures, is only Tibetans. So the Nalanda tradition, which has come down to us in the Sanskrit tradition, this profound and vast teaching should be preserved by Indians. And so there has been growing interest in Buddhism in India, and there is a Mahabodhi Society and for the preservation of Buddhism. And then Ambedkar also started his wave movement for the preservation of the Dharma. And then these days we have also people newly taking interest in the teaching of the Buddha. So Buddhism is India's religion. So this religion that originated in India, this Indian religion, has spread all of Asia in the last over 2,000 years. And Buddhism in general, and particularly Sanskrit tradition, should be preserved by the Indians themselves. So the school children recited the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, which is very good. We also did it last year. And so this traditional treasure we have come to, it's time that you preserve this treasure in your own country. So it's been nearly 59 years since I came into exile. So India is a land where all the major religious traditions of the world coexist. Before Buddhism, 3,000 to 4,000 years before Buddhism, the Sankhya school of thought spread. So, by Indians, even at that time, used the human intellect, intelligence, and wisdom, and using it for critical analysis. So, such a tradition spread in India, even at that time. And so, within the Sankhya school, there is the theistic and non-theistic schools. So the non-theistic did not believe in a creator God. And then later, Jainism also said that life has no beginning, therefore there is no creator God as such. And then there came Gautama Buddha. And so, from philosophical point of view, it's similar to that of the Jainism, except that in Buddhism, Buddhism does not believe in an independent self. So these three traditions, the non-theistic Sankhya, Jainism, and Buddhism, are special amongst the different religious traditions of India. So in the Indian philosophical systems, there are those philosophical schools which believe in a Brahma as the creator of the universe. So sometimes it seems that Brahma is seen as some kind of a primal factor, like what is believed in by the non-theistic Sankhya school, which says that there is this Prakriti which creates all. And so it seems that Brahma is not seen sometimes as a being as such, but it's some kind of a principle. And then in the Middle East, Judaism spread, so that believes in Creator God, and then Christianity and Islam also spread. So these are theistic religious traditions. So in this world, there are these two camps of religious traditions, one theistic and the other non-theistic. So all these major religious traditions exist in India. All of them have the same message of love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline. So mainly all these traditions teach love and compassion. So in order to promote, develop it further, there are these different philosophical ideas, such as believing in a creator God is to support and this development of love and compassion. So the God is said as the Father, the Creator, who created all of us. And therefore, when the followers of these theistic religions think that I was created by this God, infinite love, I mean, they really feel close to that God. So we are all brothers and sisters from this point of view. We are the same children of the same Father. And so this is really beneficial. And on the other hand, we have the non-theistic religious traditions. For example, Jainism, they really have the practice of love and compassion and not avoiding violence. Non-violence is the practice. And then, so they have such profound practices. And then in Buddhism, non-violence, not harming others, is a very important practice. So what we say is that your suffering and your pain and pleasure are in your own hands. If you harm others, the consequence is negative to you. And if you help others, the more you create more, you make others happy, create happiness in others, you are creating positive karma. And that the more you harm others and make others unhappy and suffer, that is negative action. And so you should, we say that the non-theistic schools say that because you want happiness, therefore you should not harm others. And also the theistic schools say that you should not harm others because all of them are the same creature of God. So for thousands of years, all these religious traditions have lived in coexistence and respecting and in harmony with each other, one another. And therefore, in India, the practice of ahimsa, non-violence, has been there in the land. And in connection with it, all the religious traditions have lived harmoniously. And then there is the idea of secularism in India. Whether you are a follower of some religion or not, doesn't matter. You need to respect others. And because all the religions also are have the same practice of love and compassion, we should respect others. And so secularism in India has this connotation of respecting all religions as well as those without religion. And so India could be a role model for the rest of the world in terms of this, in terms of the harmony amongst the religious traditions. And whether you are followers of any religion or not, everybody can live harmoniously in this land. And so, for the rest of the world, of course, for the Indians, this is your own tradition, your culture, and therefore it's very important to preserve it. So I am doing my best to contribute towards the revival of ancient Indian tradition in this land.
So in this world, there's so many different traditions with different philosophical tenets, but the teachings of all these religions are tolerance, patience, and also morality, and so on. So when it comes to the teachings, it's common to all these different religions. So there's so many religions with different philosophical traditions. For example, some who are theistic or non-theistic, and whether they accept the life after death or not. But when it comes to one's own philosophical traditions, and most of these actually rely upon faith. And sometimes if you feel that they are not very convenient for you to accept, then you can stay without believing or following any of these traditions. But the important is that we have to be a good person. The teachings coming from all these traditions about the patience, tolerance, love and compassion, these are all the necessities of all the human beings. There are 7 billion human beings in this world, and about 6 billion are said to be the followers of religions. But many of those who consider them to be following a particular religions, also due to their own different religions, they generate hatred against each other. consideration of the I and the others, me and the self. So using that religion itself as a source of hatred and attachment is very, very wrong. So there are so many conflicts in this world, and upon that, if the religion itself become a source of the conflicts in this world, then it is very sad. As I've said before, in India, all the different traditions live peacefully with each other, having mutual respect, though they consider and accept the existence of different traditions and having mutual respect to each other. And even being a non-believer, being a human being, so not even a human, even a sentient being, so everybody loves compassion, be it a dog, a bird, or any insects. If you show compassion, if you love them, they will respond similarly. And if you also show anger towards that animal, of course they will respond in similar way. So for humans, we are social animals, and we rely upon a community for our own survival. So for an individual, though he may be a very learned person or a very wealthy person, but he won't be able to survive by his own without relying upon anyone else. So therefore, we are a social animal. So we depend upon a community for our own survival. So if someone has to rely upon a community for one's own survival, so your own life you depend or rely upon that community. So if you have aggressions or hatred towards that community, that won't be fruitful or benefitful. So since we rely upon this community, so we all need to have love towards each other and tolerant. And when some small conflicts happen, we have to show patience. And this is something unique and also similar to the concept of social animals. So whether you follow a religion or not, it is important that you have to be a good person. So there are about 7 billion people in this world. If we contemplate today, so there are so many conflicts where the humans kill each other, where the humans bully each other, deceive each other, and those people, the poor people who are powerless, they die of starvations. And at this moment, we live peacefully here at this ground, but at the same time, in the different part of the world, the same human beings are killing each other, hundreds and thousands. And 10,000s and over 100,000s are dying of starvations every day by under the influence of the hatred and aggression and so on. For example, in Yemen and Syria, so due to the political conflicts, hundreds of the poor peoples who are without any protector, so they die of starvations. So can we tolerate such things? So especially we always pray that may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes, and may all the suffering be eliminated and so on. And if your prayers are practical, then you have to think about these sufferings. And all the sentient beings have happiness and free of suffering. So all these sentient beings you perceive as they are present somewhere else. And all the sentient beings that are present in this world, you do not consider as a part of your prayer. And from one way, then your prayer is actually a lie. So in practical, those who are related to you and who are undergoing so much suffering, so you are showing indifference to them. And when we speak about the numerous world of the numerous universe and the galaxies in this world, so those are sometimes even only a mere object of one's own prayer. But those sentient beings in this world is something that we can be of, make some difference. So the 7 billion human beings in this world are something that we can do some benefit, whether directly or indirectly. We are all humans with same brains, have the same capability of thinking. There is a language, and though there may be different language to converse, but due to one's own experience and also exchange of one's own experience, so there is a possibility to explain them. So being the follower of Lord Buddha, and every day someone who prays for the benefit of all sentient beings, we have to really contemplate and see in what way we can be of some benefit to them. So in this world, generally all sentient beings, and particularly human beings, are seen that they want happiness and doesn't want suffering. And what will be the future of this world is actually to rely entirely upon the condition of the present humans. And if the 7 billion humans can live in peaceful and in a harmonious way, it will be benefit to one own individuals. So if the 7 billion human beings doesn't experience peace and constantly under the fear of the war and so on, your own self will be also also experience the same. So there are opportunities for us to directly or indirectly benefit the 7 billion human beings in this world. And we have to encourage ourselves and make effort to as much as possible to benefit the other human beings. So therefore, all the major religions, traditions speak about love and compassion. And in this world, the modern education system doesn't speak about love and compassion. And I think over 200 years in the Western world, when the scientists first started, the innovations, the machines and the technologies came into being. So the studies of the mathematics and the science came into being. So those institutions came into being during that time. So before that, the monastic institutions are the only institutions for studies. But gradually, as the scientific innovations and the discoveries came into being, these modern education institutions came into being. So the monastic institutions took the responsibility of the teachings or the message of love and compassion, while the modern universities or the education institutions merely teach about the education system that is relevant to their own practice. So this has been happening for a long time. So nowadays in this world, there is something lacking in one's own practice of love and compassion. And even the followers of the religions, they have hatred and aggression towards each other. So we are missing the basic love and compassion. So the only possible way to restore it is through presenting these teachings in one's own education system, and that too through the rely upon the health and so on. And this has to again come through the science, as the science also, due to different research and experiments, shows that if a family is unhappy, then of course everyone, the society also becomes happy. But the members of the family, even within different members of a family, if they live under aggressions and hatred towards each other, then that won't be a happy family. So in this way, in this human society, whoever belongs to the human family, that love and compassion is a necessity. And the reason why we need this love and compassion and rely upon such research and experiments. So in this way, we have to present the teaching on the love and compassion. So gradually, the young children will be also trained in such a way that they themselves develop the love and compassion. Otherwise, generally with the lack of love and compassion, so they feel doubt or suspicious towards each other. And I used to say that most of the troublemakers in the world have sufficient modern education. So the mere modern education system is not able to make a person a very reliable one. So the current education system is not enough to make a person a reliable or a compassionate person. So therefore we speak about the moral educations or secular educations. And many scientists also agree with this and support this concept. And also modern educationists also support this concept. So therefore in India, as I said before, the secularism and also the message of ahimsa, the peace, and also the practice of karuna, compassion, has been over for thousands of years. So my Indian brothers and sisters, you have the responsibility to restore these great messages, and this is actually the habituation of your own ancestors. And therefore I request you to pay more attention towards the restorations. So then we will go through that. The Sutra of the Wheel of Dharma and the Rice Seedling Sutra. And I think these two sutras are in Pali tradition. These two sutras are common to all the Buddhist traditions in this world. There is some particular texts in Sanskrit traditions that may not be present in Pali traditions, but some of the Buddhist teachings, the discourses that are present in Pali traditions may not be present in Sanskrit, in Tibetan translation. So gradually, I think we have to translate those into different traditions. So the Sutra of the Wheel of Dharma, in the language of India, Dharmachakra Sutra, in the language of Tibet, Choji Kholedo, homage to the Omniscient One. So the title of this text is the Dharmachakra Sutra. And Dharma means to preserve, to hold something from falling down. So in Tibetan, the term for Dharma is Chö, which has a connotation of shaping something and to change a person from one state to another, and that is to deal with also shaping one's own state of mind, one's own thinking. And Lord Buddha is also taught that if one is able to tame or control one's mind, then that is the teaching of Buddha. And even in the prayer, that may all the negative activities cease and only the positive activities flourish. So whatever activities, whether be it virtuous one or negative or positive ones, so it depends upon whether one brings the happiness or not. And also the third line, that one has to tame one's mind, and this is the teaching of the Buddha, that all the activities actually rely or grounded upon one's way of thinking, that is the mind. So if one's mind is not controlled, whether one do a daily practice or any kind of teachings, so that may not be a real practice, but that will be a negative activities. So whether one's action becomes virtuous or not, it all depends upon one's mind. So when you contemplate upon mind, so the mere luminous nature of the mind is a neutral one. So you can transform it into a negative mind or a positive mind. So the mere luminous nature is a neutral one. So to convert one's that luminous mind into a positive mind are the tolerance, compassion, and love. So these help one's mind to convert or change, to transform into positive. So otherwise, for there are hatred, anger, and so on that will transform the neutral state of our mind towards negativities. So ultimately, a method or a means to control one's mind is called the Dharma. And generally we have a connotation that we are practicing Dharma or reading the Sutra, so we all point towards the texts or the canons of the sutras, but they are scriptural texts. And also reason why we label this as a scriptural text is that they contained the teachings of the Buddha. So the title of the scriptural text also are labeled through the content of those texts. And as Lord Buddha, in the Abhidhamma Kosha says that the teachings of the Lord Buddha can be categorized into two: the scriptural teaching and the realizations. And the scriptural teaching can be preserved through listening and studying, but the realizations are the three trainings, and it can be preserved by practice, and it is the only way through that to preserve and revive it. So the two teachings, there are no other way to restore or practice that other than studying it. So the fourth line, that this is the merely way to preserve that. So without the presence of the studying or listening, here the mere term doesn't exclude that it actually excludes that apart from these two ways, there are no other ways to practice the Dharma. So therefore, to bring a change to one's mind, so this is called teaching or the Dharma. So the will of Sutra of the will of Dharma. Thus have I heard once, the Blessed One, the Buddha, was residing in the deer park at Rishivardhana in Varanasi. I think this is from the first will of training of the Dharma. At that time, the Blessed One spoke to the group of 5 monks. So Lord Buddha, when he was staying as ascetic practice for 6 years, the 5 disciples, the 5 chief disciples of Kaundinya, Ashvijit, Mahanama, Bhatrika, and Vishva, and so on. So they are the chief disciples present before Lord Buddha. So continuous reading. Monks, as I correctly paid attention to the things that I do not hitherto heard, thinking this is suffering, the truth of noble beings, vision arose, and so on. So this is Lord Buddha speaking from his own experience. And if we take into the common life story of the Lord Buddha, so before becoming enlightened in Bodhgaya, so he was an ordinary person. So having from Lord Buddha at the Bodhgaya, when he became enlightened, so we usually say that from the path of preparatory to the ultimate path of enlightenment, so at one sitting course he attained enlightenment. And leaving behind, he became also a bhikshu, leaving behind all his wealthy families and the family enjoyments and so on, having seen the problems of the family life and so on. So when we speak about becoming a monk, leaving behind your family life, so it's not merely about changing one's own robes and so on. So many of us feel that merely changing your outer experience, outer robes and so on, so that may not be sufficient to become a real ascetic or a monk. And Lord Buddha studied at that time whatever the texts and the teachings prevail being taught by the different rishis, and not even study them, he also analyzed whether those teachings of the rishis were reality, the fact or not. And so the 3 steps of the listening to the text, then contemplating, reflection, and so on. So the 6 years of aesthetic practice is not merely about sitting silent meditations. So he has studied, and through rigorous trainings. So here the text reads that I correctly paid attention to teachings which arose, knowledge, awareness, understanding, and realization arose. So maybe the explanations of these words may be present in the commentary. I do not remember clearly. So the practice is not merely not to do something to with your sensories or your bodily actions, but it is to something related to one's own mental thought or mind. And to calm down one's mind, we have to distinguish between what are the negativities of not having a calm mind and the positives of a calm mind, and what are the factors that lead to the disturbance of one's mind. So in this way, we will be able to calm down our mind. And also by taking medications, we cannot calm down, bring a peace of mind. So this has to come through using one's own intelligence power to distinguish between right and wrong, and whether this disturbing nature of the mind, the afflicted minds, is there a antidote to these minds, and how we can eliminate them. So in this way, first we develop something that has not been developed before, then gradually enhance it, and finally develop the ultimate, those antidotes. Continue reading. Monks, as I correctly paid attention to the things that I had not hitherto heard, thinking this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the part that leads to the cessation of suffering, vision arose, and so on. His Holiness comments that in this way, the Lord Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. So this is a huge summary of the Lord Buddha's teaching, essence of Lord Buddha's teaching. And the purpose of the teaching or a practice is to cease one's suffering. And all the teachings actually are aimed at eliminating one's suffering. But many, since they accept the God as a creator, and they just merely pray to and supplicate to the Buddha that may my suffering be eliminated. In Indian traditions, though they believe in the God as a creator, they do have a practice of the vipassana and shamatha meditations, the calm abidance, and the special insight meditations. So in the common appearance, Lord Buddha himself also, through the cultural practice that is present in India at that time, and he enriched himself with those wisdoms and the knowledge, and having prospered further, then he became enlightened at defeating the demons and ultimately become enlightened. So to in plain speaking, so having went through the process of habituation and practice, and enriching his mind, the distinction between the wisdom of nature of his mind, so Lord Buddha is able to attain enlightenment. So analyzing in such a way that first what is the suffering, and then what is the causes of the suffering, and having experimented this way, understood the nature of the suffering, the causes of the suffering. And the suffering came through the karma, one's own actions, and also the karma is again is the mind which is under the influence of the three poisons. So then from the three poisons, and the main one which is ignorant nature of the reality, and which is that is ignorance. And then Lord Buddha saw that ignorance or not understanding the reality is the source of all those sufferings. So therefore, mere by faith, we won't be able to eliminate the ignorance, but the countermeasures of it, the opposite of it, to understand the actual nature of the phenomena, we will be able to understand the nature. So this mind, understanding the opposite or the countermeasure of ignorance, is called wisdom. So this is opposite of ignorance. So in one person's mental continuum, a mind that understands the nature of the thing and the ignorant mind may not be able to coexist together. We can speak from our own experience that when we get anger towards a particular object, so the same object towards the compassion towards that same object may not arise within us. So anger and compassions are by naturally different mindsets, having own different focus. So therefore, these two different minds, opposite minds, focusing at one object may not arise at the same time within us. So how to counter the anger is the only way is to improve the intensity of the love and compassions. So it will come in the afterwards. And the very unique teaching of the Lord Buddha is the Four Truth, that is the path of truth. It will come in the Right Seedling Sutra about the teaching of dependent arising. And this is a unique teaching of Lord Buddha, the teaching on selflessness. And the selflessness doesn't speak about the non-existent of self, but self as being dependent upon its aggregates. So therefore, there is not an existence of a self that is independent by itself. So all the things appear to our eyes as having its own inherent existence. When I look at you, all of you appear as independent individuals to me. Even these flowers in front of me, they do not appear as mere label or designated, but it appears as having its own object of designations and so on to me. And through that, the mistaken conceptual thought comes, and that mistaken conceptual thought brings the attachment and desire. And this is present in the sutra, and also this is very extensively and very clearly presented by the teachings of Nagarjuna, the six corpus of reasoning. And also, the external phenomena doesn't exist externally, but they exist on relation to a conceptual mind. And this is even said or proved by the scientists when they explain the quantum physics. The external phenomena, they doesn't exist objectively. There is an observer, so it's in relation to the observers. And as long as there is the observer, the observed object also exists. And this is very similar to the Chittamataran's teaching, that since the object and the mind are not different from each other and exist at the same time, so therefore they are not external phenomena. So these explanations of the scientists are also quite near to the Chittamataran school of thought. And in the following also it will be said that the ignorance is not merely not understanding the reality, but it is mistakenly conceiving the wrong nature of the phenomena. So this is a wrong view. So having a valid cognitions will be able to eliminate our wrong view. So continuously reading the text. Monks, as I correctly paid attention to the things that I had not heard, thinking with higher knowledge, I should comprehend suffering, that truth of noble beings, vision arose, knowledge, awareness, understanding, and realization arose. His Holiness comment that having went through numerous experiments, then the vision arose. Page number 88. Monks, as I correctly paid attention to the things that I had not heard, thinking with higher knowledge. And this one I haven't received, I do not have the oral transmission lineage. And I don't think that I have to read each words and sentence. And we have a custom that in the past that we have the oral transmission, so therefore we give the teaching. But then, and those texts which we do not have the oral transmission lineage, then we just preserve in the altar and doesn't do any text. So this is wrong, I think. So Lord Buddha himself has not distinguished the text as having an oral transmission lineage or not. So whether there is a lineage of the transmission or not, we have to read the text and we have to study the text. And this is my view. So whether we have the lineage of the transmission of those important texts of the Nagarjunas and so or not, we have to study them. So in plain speaking, the 100 volumes of the sutras, discourses of Lord Buddha, are a kind of close advice of the Lord Buddha. So having read those canons, then we will be able to understand that Lord Buddha has really taught this and this. And on to commentary to it, the Indian scholars and the pundits have written about 200 canons. So I think the oral transmission, the transmission lineage is important, but I do not think that's the main important part. So since I do not have the transmission lineage, I don't want to read each phrase and words. So the essence is that the suffering, the unhappiness can be felt even by an insect, and the happiness is even desired by the insect. So whether they have a feeling or the emotions of the happiness or not, at that time, if there is a safe feeling without the fear, so that is considered as a happy. So if it is a being that has a consideration of a happy and being able to distinguish the happiness and the suffering, so this kind of sensation is even present in the organisms and the insects. So the present happiness that we are discussing may be an emotions or a feeling of happiness, but at that moment, a state of calmness that is free of the fear and the danger can be also expressed as happiness. So the externals, having a good food and the drinks, maybe temporarily. So to have a permanent mental happiness is important. For example, in the sensories and the outside, even though there may be so many distractions and the unhappiness, but if your mental state is at calm and happiness, so that actually tells us that the mental happiness at your mind is more important. So we do not need a reason to prove that all by nature they want happiness and do not want suffering, but the actions, the agent or the origin of the suffering is not by outside, but is from inside.
So the pain and pleasure, the cause is not external but internal. So, para number 4 on page 88. Monks, as I correctly paid attention to the things that I had not hitherto heard, thinking with higher knowledge I have comprehended suffering, that truth of noble beings. The truth of noble beings, vision arose, knowledge, awareness, understanding, realization arose, and then also the next para. So the most important thing to understand here is the truth, cessation and truth path. So we can, of course, realize how the suffering is caused by our unruly mind. So whether the true cessation is something that is possible to be attained, achieved, and particularly is it possible for us as individuals to attain that. And so Master Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental verses of wisdom verses of the middle way, is written for that purpose. And so in the 26th chapter, how we dwell in samsara is taught, and and then chapter 18 and 24. Chapter 18 teaches that by ending or elimination, through the elimination of karma and delusions, there is liberation and so forth. And so here, elimination of suffering or cessation of suffering is not just in the sense that suffering disintegrates moment by moment, but so here cessation or liberation arises or is attained through the cessation or elimination of the karma and of mental afflictions. So we are brought into this samsara, the cycle of existence, where we have suffering due to our mental afflictions, and these mental afflictions arise from, as Master Nagarjuna says, karma and the mental afflictions arise from conceptual thought. So here, this refers to this exaggerated way of looking at things. So one scientist whom I know, who is not a Buddhist, live alone being a Buddhist, is not even a religious person, but who has treated people with psychiatric problem, so for many decades. And from his experience, he actually concluded that when we become angry at somebody, the person or the thing looks absolutely negative. But 90% of that negativeness is our own mental projection. So this is similar to exactly what Master Nagarjuna says. These karma and afflictions arise from this exaggerated outlook. And this exaggeration arises from fabrication, which refers to that of grasping at true existence. And so when we look into the cause of suffering, whether it comes from self or other, both or neither, without any causes, the Buddha was said to have taught that suffering comes through dependence on its causes. So, due to our grasping at some true existence, this inappropriate mentation, which is this exaggerated outlook, arises in us. So when we look at things, things appear to have some kind of objective independent existence. And because of that appearance, clinging and actually grasping at that way of existence, then this exaggerated outlook arises. So what we need to overcome or eliminate is this. It cannot be overcome through mantra recitations or making offerings of butter lamb thousands of times or by doing some kind of the rituals. But what can end this is what arises through dependence is said to be empty, and that is itself said to be designated, and that is the middle way. There is no thing which is not dependent, therefore there is no thing which is not empty. So this is how Master Nagarjuna summarizes the teaching So when we look at things, they appear to have some objective existence from their own side. And so when that appears, the things appear that they do not dependent, they do not depend or are not reliant on others. So when you actually conceive things to have some independent objective existence, then this exaggerated outlook also arises. So when you are able to say that, confirm that things have no objective independent existence, then that outlook, exaggerated outlook, also decreases, is reduced, and that in turn helps to reduce our anger and hatred and attachment. And then in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, there is mention of the mind, the nature of mind being luminous. So although our mind is ruled by this grasping at true existence, now it is not, there are many occasions when there is no strong, active grasping at the true existence as such. So when you have love as your experience, there is no anger. So this is how the mind works. When an opposite experience arises, the other one cannot arise. Even those who have not studied Madhyamaka texts, you can see this experience. Whereas if you actually conceive that things have some kind of an objective existence from their side, then there is this exaggerated outlook arising in you. Whereas when you are able to confirm or prove that things have no independent objective existence, then that also helps to reduce this exaggerated outlook. So whether the true origin and the suffering can be ended or not could be actually understood. You can actually see that cessation, true cessation, is possible when you actually put together the teachings that you find in the second and third turnings of the wheel of Dharma. That can happen when you actually first study the teachings and then reflect on them over and over again. So not only leaving it at staying at just intellectual understanding, superficial understanding, but reflecting on the teaching of emptiness, for example, you will be able to build your experience and conviction more and more. For example, grasping at true existence does not have, this grasping does not have any valid knowledge or support. You can only say that things appear to have true existence, appear to exist truly. That is the only reason that you can use to say that things exist truly. Other than that, there is no perfect or a reason and logic. So love and compassion and so forth are not rooted in this grasping at true existence as such. And so mind is a stable basis for developing these qualities, and that once you acquaint your mind with these principles of love and so forth, and you have built some steady experience of it, you don't need to put more, extra effort, and this experience of love and so forth can increase infinitely. And so, in this way, you have to understand how we can cultivate the Dharma and experience the Dharma within ourselves. It's not just the words that you recite, saying, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, and so forth, but the main profundity of the teaching of the Buddha should be understood through the true teaching on true cessation and true path, and not otherwise. And therefore, it is important to understand the true Dharma. So, page 89, paragraph 2, monks, once I had achieved the vision, knowledge, awareness, understanding, and realization of turning these four truths of noble beings in 3 phases in 12, with 12 aspects, I had been freed from the world, replete with gods and Brahma, devils, and so forth. So paragraph, the previous one, and then this one. Brahmins, Brahma, Mandikans, Brahmins, humans, and gods. I had escaped from it, severed ties with it, and been delivered from it. I dwelt much with the mind, free from error, bungs. I then had the knowledge that I had been fully awakened to unsurpassed perfect Buddhahood. So, of course, we have many founding teachers of the different religious traditions, and whose physical qualities can be, may be praised on the basis of their physical qualities, such as the Buddha's the quality of this, the major and minor marks. But only that Buddha can be praised, is praised from the point of view of his teaching of interdependent nature of things. So, and therefore in the Sanskrit tradition, for example, in Pramanavartika, the Buddha is said to be someone who is authority, who has become an authority or reliable person through logic and reasoning on the basis of this teaching of dependent arising. So when you give thought to the dependent arising nature of things, you'll be able to gain the experience to a certain extent that things are actually dependent. The more you understand that things are dependently arisen, it helps to counter or reduce decrease your exaggerated outlook on things. I mean, this is something that you can build. This kind of experience can be built through decades of practice. For example, I can say that I have gained this kind of experience to a certain extent by having thought or given thought on it for over 60 years. And so the teachings that we find can be experienced if we reflect on them through reason and logic. And so, with regard to the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, I mean, it's everyone's experience that we don't want suffering, but we want happiness. But the point that we need to think about is what is suffering, whether it has its cause or not. If it has cause, we do not only want to say that suffering changes moment by moment, but the cause of suffering is this erroneous outlook, our erroneous perception and misunderstanding of things. And therefore, these can be overcome by understanding the reality as it is. And this is the way to go about with countering in our process of countering this cause of suffering. So if you understand the true cessation and true suffering, true path well, then you'll be able to see that the teacher who taught such these is someone who is reliable. And so the Master Nagarjuna pays homage to the Buddha for teaching us out of to overcome all the views. And what is that path is taught in the salutation verses of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, where the Buddha, he says the Buddha is the best of all teachers, who taught that which is dependently arisen is without cessation and so forth. So Master Tsongkhapa also praises the Buddha for teaching dependent origination of things, and those who assert things outside of the teaching of the Buddha actually affirm or strengthen their own misperception and so forth, and therefore the Master Tsongkhapa says that who would not feel the reverence for the Buddha from the depths of their heart, and therefore through the teaching, through the true Dharma, which comprises true cessation and true path, we can have a true Sangha, and by progressing along the path, one finally becomes a Buddha. And so we all talk about the teaching of the Buddha, but in order to say that, well, who is a Buddha, who is a Sangha, we need to actually understand well the teaching, and not just the scriptures, but the teaching pertaining to those of them with reference to the true cessation and true path must be understood well. So one time I went to a place and I met people whom I knew from years ago, from a long time. And so I said, we are all Buddhists, aren't we? And they said, yes. And they said, I asked them, what is Buddhism? And they said, it's about taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And when I asked, who is a Buddha? They said, they don't know. They didn't know. And I asked if Buddha and Brahma are same, Ishvara are same. They said, yes, they are. So it looked like they were all in equanimity, meditation on emptiness, as if everything is seen as of one taste. And then in Lucknow, some students were reciting the Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha and Dharma and Sangha. And I asked them who is a Buddha and who is Dharma. They didn't know. What is Dharma? They didn't know. So what is Dharma? When it comes to the Dharma, it has to be an experience that develops within ourselves, and that needs to be developed through our study of the teaching. I'm going through the next text. In Indian language, Arya Shali Stamba, Nama Mahayana Sutra, and Tibetan Papasalu Jangba, and in English, the Right Seedling Sutra, the Noble Sutra of Right Seedling, and homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So this shows the text belongs to the Sutra category. So thus have I heard at one time that Bhagwan was residing on Vulture Pig Mountain in Rajgriha with a large sangha of 1,250 bhikshus and with a many bodhisattva, mahasattvas. So this belongs to the Mahayana tradition. So in the Sutra Alamkara, Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, there is this, the terms Mahayana and Hinayana used, but I usually don't prefer using these terms. I usually prefer to use Pali and Sanskrit traditions, because when you say that you are a Mahayana follower, I mean, we tend to look down upon those who follow the other traditions, and as if they are lower. That's totally wrong. So the teaching of the Buddha, such as the Four Noble Truths and the Vinaya teachings and so forth, are the foundations of the Buddha Dharma. So if you actually look down upon those practitioners practicing the teaching of the Four Noble Truths and the Vinaya, I mean, it's totally wrong. So without the basis of the Vinaya, the morality practice, I mean, you cannot have the concentration, the training of concentration and training of wisdom, because Vinaya is the basis, the foundation of these two. And so the bhikshus in Theravada countries like Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, and so forth, are practitioners of Vinaya. And so we cannot look down upon them at all. There may be those who are bad monks as well in this tradition. So by using 10 criteria or so, the teaching of the Sanskrit tradition is called the Mahayana tradition. So if you actually cultivate those criteria within yourself, then maybe you can have some kind of a claim to Mahayana. Otherwise, just saying that, oh, they are Hinayanis is nothing, means nothing to you. So we are working towards harmony amongst all the different religious traditions. While we are doing that, if you say that we are Mahayanis and they are Hinayanis, I mean, that's totally wrong, and looking down upon them. So what is found in the other tradition is the foundational teaching and the
So reading from the page number 93. The Bhagavan was residing on Vulture Peak mountain in Rajgriva with a large sangha of 1,250 bhikshus and with a great many bodhisattva mahasattvas. At that time, Venerable Shariputra and there is a commentary on the Samdhinimurcha Sutra by the Chinese master Huinzang. I have read the commentary. So Master Huinzang Wensek is said to be. So Huinzang is said to be the abbot or a master belonging to Korean traditions, and in his commentary, it is written that the Maitreya Nath, the way that name was given, his mother was also by the name of Maitreya. So they accept the Maitreya Nath as being a human. So I think there are two forms of Lord Maitreya. One is in the human form, and one is in the God, the heavenly being form. So those explanations coming from Asangas and other teachings, and also from many of the Perfection of Wisdom sutras and the texts, we usually refer to Maitreya as heavenly beings. So I think that there is also a human beings. And there is a phrase here that they both sat down on a flat rock. I think this is very wonderful. I was in Thailand once. Buddhadasa, one of the chief monk of Thai traditions. I met him first time, and second time when I went, he was no more. So the place where he sat, there is a rock. Generally, when he gives the teachings, he used to sit on that rock. So I feel really humbled. And the real practitioner should be someone like him. And I think this is a mistake of the Tibetan people, that in Tibet, So even though there may be not much essence, but external, we used to have a lot of ornaments and so on. For example, I am sitting on this Dharma throne and speaking. So the very seat of the rock seat of the Buddha Dasa was a rock, and similar to this one, continuously reading. After exchanging courtesies upon meeting each other, they both sat down on a flat rock. Venerable Shariputra then said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya, "Today the Bhagavan, gazing at a rice seedling, spoke this aphorism to the bhikshus. Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha." Having said this, the Bhagavan fell silent. Maitreya, what is the meaning of this aphorism spoken by the Sudhaga? What is the dependent arising? What is the Dharma? What is the Buddha? How does one see the Dharma? By seeing dependent arising. How does one see the Buddha? By seeing the Dharma. The Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya then replied to the Sharidatiputra, "Sharidatiputra, with regard to what dependent arising is, in the statement made by the Bhagavan, the Lord of Dharma, the Omniscient One, Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha." Well, the phrase dependent arising means that something arises because something else already exists. Something is born because something else was already born. So this is a general teaching. So this very phrase, that because something arises, something else already exists, takes about the dependent origination of compounded phenomena. And something is born because something else was already born. The second line refers to all the phenomena, all the phenomena, whether it's compounded phenomena or not. And there is a third category of the dependent arising, of depending upon each qualities. And even this one, we can further categorize into two, that one dependent arising that is depending upon the part and merely labeled. So when it comes to the teachings of Nagarjuna, so ultimately things exist merely by name and a label. So this comes to the very subtle form of dependent arising, that things do not have any kind of existence from their objective side rather than merely by a designation. So here we will come to the understanding of the emptiness as dependent arising and dependent arising as emptiness. So here, when we speak about the 12 interdependent links, it's about the interdependent links of the compounded phenomena. So therefore, since they are relation about each other by depending about their causes, so the compounded factors come. And here, the result also rely upon the causes for its existence. But not only the result, even the cause itself rely upon the result for its existence. So first, I think it's time for our lunch break.